We can talk. Oh, yeah, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum. I'm one of the co-founders of The Blaze, and I'm here today with our friend Peter Heller. Peter, welcome back to The Blaze.
So great to see you again.
I'm so excited to have you back here. Peter, it's our first interview of 2025. And guys, I was doing the math in my limited left brain today, and Blaze is going into its 6th year. We have been on the air since March 2020, when a bunch of us put together this initiative to link writers and their readers in the age of COVID. And now, obviously, we're way beyond COVID, and we are still introducing your favorite writers and their new books, like Burn, in their living rooms so they can talk without even having to wear pants. And you can ask all the questions you want. If you are a repeat Blazer, welcome back. Thanks for bringing your light to the blaze. If you're new here, welcome. You can follow us on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter/X, Twitter. We are ubiquitous. And if you like what you see here, give us a like or a follow. Also, you can sign up for our newsletter at www.mightyblaze.com. We'll never have literary FOMO ever again. No more FOMO. Nobody likes that. And now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce today's guest officially. Peter, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, buckle up. You. Peter Heller is the national best-selling author of The Last Ranger, The Guide, The River, Celine, The Painter, and The Dog Stars, and today's book, Burn. The Painter was a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize and won the prestigious Reading the West Book Award. And The Dog Stars has been published in 26 languages to date. And also, there's some news about this, which I will let you jump into your own bio to tell us.
So I guess Ridley Scott is going to start filming The Dog Stars in April, apparently.
I was so excited about this. Oh my God, so excited. I cannot wait. I'm popping my popcorn already. Yeah. Peter's also the author of 4 nonfiction books, including Kook, What Surfing Taught Me About Life, Love, and Catching the Perfect Wave, which is great. By the way, you guys, I'm listening to this on audio, which was awarded the National Outdoor Book Award for Outdoor Literature. He holds an MFA from Iowa in poetry and fiction, and he lives in Denver, Colorado, except kind of not, right? Like you're kind of outside of Denver.
The edge of town.
The edge of town, right?
On the west edge of town.
Western edge of town. Yep. I rely on Peter for Instagram photos that bring nature into my Instagram feed that are really beautiful, as well as relying on him to see like what's going on with his books, and on Facebook as well. You should follow him for all his adventures, which are numerous. And just like, I love having you come to the Blaze, because the rest of us are like, we're sitting here in our sweatpants writing books, and Peter is also writing books, and yet he is an avid outdoorsman having like insane adventures that we were just talking about in the green room. I love hearing about this. Today we're here to talk about Burn, which is a book about, Peter, take it away for us if you want to give us your elevator pitch, please.
Sure. So it's about 2 lifelong friends. They grew up together, kindergarten through high school, on a little dirt road in Vermont, a mile apart, Jess and Story. And they were on the same soccer team all through those years, fell in love with the same girls, were in and out of each other's houses, helping get the wood in, maple sugar. They're like brothers. And now they're in their mid-30s, and every year they get together to hunt and fish in the fall. And this year they're in north central Maine, in this big wild country, the timber country up there that's kind of lakes and mountains and woods. And they're hunting moose. And 5 days into their trip, they move their camp in their truck, and they come on a bridge on a gravel road that's been blown, as in blown up. And they backtrack, they need gas, and they come to a village that's been burned to the ground. And they soon come to realize that Maine has seceded from the Union while they've been out. That's the beginning.
And to find out what happens, you have to read the book. But these guys basically wander out of the backwoods into a civil war, and they're trying to kind of put their arms around what is happening, who is doing it. It's not immediately apparent what's happening. So they're kind of hunting the war, if you will, right? Like they're trying to figure out from all of the carnage around them and the clues, like what even is happening, let alone how to handle it.
Right.
Yeah, it's really vivid and really unnerving. And I'm wondering if you would do us the honor of reading a little bit, because I think there's no better way to get to know a book than to hear the author read a passage from it.
I thought I'd just read for a minute. So, as I said, these guys are best buddies. They live close together. And the Brants in this passage are Story's family. He's a single, he's just an only child. His parents are sort of reserved. He lives up the hill. And he often comes down the hill and spends the night because Story's family is raucous, rambunctious, fun. His Story's mom is a horsewoman. His father's a doctor. Story has two siblings, and it's fun down there. And so here's this passage. And so the Brants, who are always jostled enough to squeeze Jess in. Jess could jog down to their ridge in 7 minutes or ride his bike in 3. And by middle school, it was fair to say he spent 2 or 3 nights a week there. And he slept better under the heap of barn-smelling quilts than anywhere else on the planet. Sometimes at night, looking out the window at the flowing shadow of the tree line under stars blown like grass seed, and listening to the barks of geese drifting down from the high dark, he felt that he might die. Not perish, but simply cease at the apex of his own fullness. There would be a rightness to it. Joy could not be sustained for more than a minute, but what if one was lifted on a wave of happiness, and right on the breaking crest, one's spirit flew off like a wind-torn albatross? What if? As he followed Story up the freshly maintained track that smelled of shorn grass and trimmed saplings, Jess thought, I am already dead. A long time ago, I died of fullness 100 times, and so now I need not be frightened, but I am. So
That is beautiful. Thank you. We always love Story Hour on Blaze, and it is such a great thing to hear an author read his own work. Is there a moment, like, that was not planning to ask this question, but I'd love to go off script. Is there a moment that you had that was like that, where you thought you might be able to just float off on your own contentment, on your own satisfaction?
I've had many moments in my life like that where I've just thought, I could die right now. I'm just so full. And I really don't know what happiness is. I don't know that it exists. I know that joy exists, and I know that there's euphoria and stuff like that. But those they're so they're so fleeting. They're like weather in New England, right? Wait a minute, it'll change. And so knowing that these things are very ephemeral, I always feel like, wow, I feel so much joy right now. I feel so connected to the earth or to nature, to friends that are with me, and I know it's gonna vanish like smoke, in a minute. And so if I just died right now, it'd be all right.
That's a good life, I think.
Seems like a good measure.
You have a bunch of those
I think I could die all the time. I don't know.
Well, yeah. I guess, if you wanted to die all the time from misery, that's not a great life. But if you think,
right.
I've had a lot of these moments that I can string together. I think happiness is such a fleeting state, and we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but it's never something that is static. It's something that's there and slips and there and slips. So if you're wise enough to see that you have these moments where you could float away from pure contentment, strung together, that seems to me to be on balance a good life. And I'm very interested in the fact that there are these moments in Burn, even though we are in the middle of an American Civil War. Like, one of the things that you do beautifully in all of your books, and guys, if you haven't read all of Peter's library of books, you should. You've got a big treat in store. But all the characters are imperiled, always. whether by man or by nature. But also there's this great love of nature that provides the amphitheater in which the books take place, and the sort of spirituality that guides all of the books. And I'm wondering, when you sit down to write, are you planning, I know you're more of a pantser than a plotter, but are you planning that sort of recipe, that balance of paying reverence to nature at the same time the people in the books are imperiled?
Yeah. I mean, I never plan a thing. And I was thinking about it today, and I was thinking how I hook in. And, I always start with the first line. I don't know I don't know where I am. I don't know who's speaking. But it has to be a line that enchants me somehow, and whose music I love. There has to be a cadence. And then if I love it, it carries me into a second line and a third, and I just sort of follow the music of the language into the story. And I have to trust that it's going to bring me where I need to go. So it's maybe the inverse of the process that maybe other people use, where there's a plot and a story first, or even an idea. For me, it's just the music of the language, and I have to be in love with it somehow. And I think I started Burn Off with something like, he let the fire burn to embers, let the dark envelop him, and stood.
Literally, that's what it is.
Nice.
If you hadn't read it for us.
Keeping me on track. But anyway, it sort of felt it had heft to it, and it had some rhythm, and I liked it, and so I kept going. But the interesting, Jenna, the funnest thing, since I'm always I'm always on a narrative current going into territory that's unknown. And so there's always that excitement. But this book particularly was so crazy right from the start. I mean, these burned towns, these guys don't know what's going on. And for me, more than any other book that I've written, I had no clue what was going on, not even an inkling. And I remember I called my agent. So there's, these burned towns, there's boats floating at their moorings untouched. There's so blown bridges and scattered stuff on the road, but no bodies. And I called my agent and I said, is this aliens, do you think? And he said, I don't know. Keep going, keep writing. And, then it turned out that, it was Maine had decided to secede, and they were in the middle of a civil war. But, I really didn't know. I didn't know if it was aliens. I thought maybe it was the Canadians. I mean, they've been so polite, for so long. Maybe they just got fed up, and it was like, let's go tear up Maine,
They just popped.
They snapped.
Yeah. I think that's probably going to happen like fairly soon. We had it.
Trump keeps prickling Macron. I mean, Trudeau. It could be bad.
Yeah, not so great. They're like, we're done, sitting here politely with our Tim Hortons. We're going to come down there and cause some havoc. But it's interesting. There's this sort of essential mystery in the first part of the book that, of course, any writer plotting a book would envy, because it's the mystery that keeps us going, along with the beautiful imagery and the friendship between the two men. Like, we want to know, what is happening? Have people been raptured? It's almost looks like that. And yet it's very sinister. I know from hearing you talk to my pal and colleague and dear, beloved Caroline Levitt, who's talked to you about process, that you start with a line and keep following the lines throughout the story. Do you back out when you're done with the book and do a sort of reverse outline and say, oh, okay, now I see what the whole picture of the book is? Or like, when do you start to know like what the full shape of the book is?
I almost never know until I write the end. I mean, it's just crazy. I don't know how that works. It's interesting. Like, I tour in France, and they love the books because they're about wild nature so much, and there's not so much wild nature in Europe. And so, but they're very intellectual readers. They're very erudite. They're very intellectual, and they ask questions, the kinds of questions that an author should be able to answer, like, oh, you use this leitmotif from the Dog Stars of the Ode on the Grecian Urn, which repeats through the flannel blanket of the man shooting the pheasant, and how did you incorporate that with? And they go on, and I just look at them and I say, but I just wrote the book. I have no clue, because I see that happened, And it did happen. I mean, there are these sort of things, wonderful things that happen with motifs and with themes and images that repeat. And but I never, I never plan it. So I'm just, thank God. I get on my knees and I just thank God that it happens. And yeah.
I will give you a little tip that I always do when people talk to me about the symbolism in my own books, and I say, "Oh, thank God somebody caught that. Thank you for seeing it."
Thank you.
Never intended a symbol in my life. Although, unlike you, I'm like a mad plotter. I know our thoughtful bro Mark Cecil is watching. Hey, Mark, and he and I are like the structuralists, and we talk about structure all the time. But I think in some ways, for me at least, probably not for Mark because he's a great storyteller, but for me, it's a sort of anxiety of setting off into the wilderness of a book without a map. I need at least some sort of idea of where I'm going. And then the map, of course, gets redrawn 10 or 11 times. No kidding. Like I have so many I have a folder full of outlines this thick from my latest book. I outline and then I throw them out, outline, throw it out. The idea gets refined. But the fact that you can put out something that all of your books have such great backbones of plot. Like they look like they have been really well orchestrated from the beginning. So I'm always impressed by that.
Yeah, like did I tell you the story about meeting Lee Child?
No.
So I was at a writers festival in outside of Palm Springs, and it's a weird place to have a writers festival. It was at a golf resort, very fancy golf resort. It was weird.
That is weird.
I remember I had breakfast with a great cartoonist, Mankoff. Remember him from the New Yorker?
Yes, I follow him still.
And it was really fun. But writers festivals made me kind of anxious. I mean, there's just so much going on, and I get untethered. And the way I tether myself is I get up early and I work, and I go have coffee really early, and I work for a couple hours, and then I figure whatever else happens during the day, everything can explode. But at least I got the work done. So I'm there at 6 a.m. at the coffee pot, and there's Lee Child, and I think he's doing the same thing. And we got to talking the way writers talk and about process. And I said, yeah, man, I just start with the first line and let it rip. And he said, I do too. And I was like, nah. He said, yeah, I have no idea. He said, I just throw everything up against the wall that I can think of. That's fun. Like, dead bodies, car accidents, car chases, lurking, menacing figures. That's all in the first half. Second half, I just tie up all the threads, and whatever's thread is not tied up is a red herring, and I'm good. And I just burst out laughing. I was like, man, I have read books on writing novels. You just gave me a method in like 2 lines. And pretty much, I don't work exactly that way, but it surprised me how many. And then when I first started the Dog Stars and sat down to write, and I wanted to start with the first line without a plot, I had no idea if that was even legal. And I called my friend Carlton Cuse, who was the showrunner for Lost and all these big shows. I mean, he's written all these incredible TV stories. Have I told you about him? I don't want to repeat myself. I don't want to be like
not me. You might have told Caroline, but you didn't tell me. So I'm just sitting here enraptured. Please continue.
So there again, it was my first novel, and I didn't know, like, does anyone start with the first line and just let it rip and have no plot and no idea? So I called him, and he was my best friend in high school. And I said, Carlton, you've worked with a lot of novelists. Does anyone do that? He didn't even hesitate. He just said, yeah, man, Stephen King, I worked with him. And he often starts with the first line, has no clue. It's a voice. The voice is a character. The character's in a place. There's a situation, because there's always a situation, and he writes into the story. And then he said something that really shocked me. He said, I work with Elmore Leonard, and he often starts with the first line. It's like some guy in a bar in South Florida, at a strip bar probably, and he just lets it rip. And I don't know, that sort of gave me permission for that first book, and I've just kept doing it. But not to say that at times, I wouldn't stop, halfway through and sort of do a general blocking, or even sometimes, think of a plot point. I mean, I think I have another, when you're ready, I have another great story to tell you about that. Meeting another writer who had the best advice, but maybe we should save that for like 5 minutes from now.
Yeah, we can do whatever you like. I am doing this interview sort of backwards. I usually talk about the book and then I get into the craft and geek out for like an hour. I mean, this is such a joy to talk to other writers about inside baseball and craft and so on. But yeah, tell us the excellent advice, and then we can talk more about Vern. I would like, we all want to know what the best advice was, of course.
Okay. All right. This was amazing. So I had written The Dog Stars with that method. And I finished the book in like 7 months. Carlton gave me permission, okay, just let it rip. I sort of loved the book when it was finished. Like, it's sort of like God on the seventh day, and it's like, this is pretty good. I don't know if God said pretty good, but I did.
Perfect, except for these little people running around everywhere. But other than that, yeah.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, I heard of second novel syndrome and the sophomore effort and how much pressure there can be on a debut novelist if there's a little bit of a clamor on the first book. And I didn't want that. So I thought, I better sit down. I have 9 months till this thing comes out. I better sit down and start the second one and get it mostly done by then. So I sat down, I started writing The Painter. And in The Painter, right in the beginning, it's not ruining it for anyone who hasn't read it, my hero kills a guy with a rock, a guy who's like beaten a horse almost to death. And our hero saves the horse and then ends up killing the guy. Boo-hoo, right? And I started thinking, like, should the guy have a brother bent on vengeance, this victim? And I called Jenny Jackson, my wonderful editor at Knopf, and I said, hey, Jenny, should this victim have a brother? And she said, oh, yeah, of course. So I wrote the brother. And then I started thinking, my hero's a painter. He's got a commission to do a painting in Santa Fe of these twins. When should he go? And then I was thinking, should the brother chase him and try and kill him on the way? And then I was thinking, I'm thinking about it. This can't be good, because I didn't think about the last one. I would just sit down at the coffee shop and I'd go, don't think, just listen. And Hig would start talking like he's on the other side of a campfire. It was so cool. So now I'm thinking about it. And that really made me anxious. So I'm in Paonia, little tiny town in Western Colorado, where the book is actually set. I'm in the actual coffee shop, this tiny little hippie coffee shop where Jim Stegner, my hero, meets his lover, meets his model, who becomes his lover. I'm in that actual coffee shop, and there's only one table in this tiny place. You're going to talk to anyone who's at the table. Guess who was there? Paolo Bacigalupi, the great science fiction writer. I mean, this guy's won Hugo Awards, Andromeda Awards, huge bestsellers, blockbusters. And we got to talking about method. I'd wave to him on the street and stuff, but I'd never talk to him. We got to talking about process the way I had done with Lee Chom. And I talked to him about my problem, and he's a lot younger than me, but he picked up his coffee cup and he said, sit down, son. He said, I wrote 2 short stories. One was sort of a fugue state. I kind of woke up and it was done, and I sent it in and it won a big award, and I love it. Second story, you plotted every second, engineered the characters to interact a certain way in every scene, total authorial control. I sent it off, it won a big award, and I love it. Now when I hold them both up, I love them both, and I can't tell the difference. And he leaned forward with his coffee cup and he said, just make sure it doesn't suck. And the whole creative burden just sort of lifted off my shoulders. It was like, I think that's something I can probably handle. But what he was saying that was so marvelous was, look, rely on your craft, dude. I mean, you've written hundreds of stories that you've thrown out when you were coming up. You know what to do. Just tighten up the slow stuff, throw out the bad stuff, rearrange it if you need to. Just make sure it's not terrible. The other thing he was saying that was so wonderful was every single story can have a different method. You might pants one book. You might pants it part way and then block it out. You might plot. Don't worry about it. Just make sure in the end it's all right. And that sort of has made me relax about whatever method I end up using. And if mix and match might work, yeah, sure.
I love that. Just make sure it doesn't suck. I think I need that on a t-shirt. And it's as a pro writer, there's always stuff that's going to suck, even in the best thing you ever write. There's always going to be some chaff that you have to comb out in some way, even if it's divinely inspired, your humanness gets in the way. And so you need to kind of take that out and rearrange it. But speaking of rearranging things so that they don't suck, you mentioned your great editor, Jenny Jackson, who's like my girl crush. I love her. She's also an author. She wrote Pineapple Street, which is one of the funniest books I have read about wealthy people or in general. So if you guys haven't read Pineapple Street yet, you should buy it. And also check out my interview with Jenny that I did a couple of years ago when that book came out. So when does she get involved in the process? Like, how does she help you make sure the stuff doesn't suck? Or do you make sure it doesn't suck and then you give it to her as a fait accompli and say, here you go, I made you something?
Yeah, it all depends. Like with Burn, I wrote the book and I sent it to her, and we, as you heard it when we both spoke in Michigan, then she gave me some ideas that I needed to clarify. Nothing too big. But when I wrote The Painter, this one, where Paolo had given me the advice, I thought I was done. And I got on a conference call with Jenny and my agent, David Halpern, who's magnificent also. He's an old time agent. He red line edits, and is brilliant and could be an editor. So I always feel that by the time Jenny gets it, it's in pretty good shape. But we got on the phone. I thought I was done. And Jenny said, you're about 80% there. And I was like crushed. I was like, oh my God, I worked so hard. And she said, I think we need a prologue. I think we need an epilogue. And I think we need a scene 80% of the way through that acts as the scene in the Dog Stars in the control tower that was super violent and cathartic. We need a cathartic scene that brings all the themes together. And I was like sort of blown away at the precision of that advice. And so I did it, and it made the book twice as good. And so we have this relationship where sometimes I feel super confident and I just tear through. I think I wrote Burn in like 3 months. It's just on fire.
Yeah. No pun intended.
It's pretty much the way, the book that you have is pretty much the way I wrote it, with, some little clarifications and stuff. But other books I've had to rewrite, with Jenny's input. And I remember in the guide, I think it was the guide, I called her up 3/4 of the way through and said, look, I need some real plot help. And then we hammered it out for, like an hour. We talked about plot. And so it's not to say that it's always just this, it's not always just this fugue state where it just comes out fully birthed, I mean, there is, back and forth, and it's great to have someone you can trust, it's always good.
Yeah, that's what a good editor will do, right? I mean, it's painful to get feedback. The only feedback I ever want to get on my work is, this is perfect. Even when I know it's not perfect, I will present it to my agent and I will say, I am too fragile to hear anything at the moment except this is so perfect. So tell me everything you love about it. And then we can put it into the Play-Doh factory and have it get squashed through. And then it comes out the other side of book eventually after I do all the revisions. But I do think that my editor also is great, Sarah Nelson, and she will give me suggestions and then say, you fix it, But I love that you can call somebody and say, I need help. I need to use my lifeline here in the story. I'm still haunted by that scene in the Dog Stars, by the way, about the cathartic scene you're talking about. And I feel like Burn shares this sort of same emotional territory as Dog Stars, in that, unlike some of the intervening books, it returns to a sort of dystopia. But now I feel like the dystopia is much closer. Do you feel that also? Closer to reality, I should say.
Totally. I mean, when I finished the book, I sort of felt like, wow, this could happen next week. I mean, really, literally. And this is before the election, of course. And I still think that our little fragile democracy could be in for some rough road. I don't know.
I do think, I mean, we've talked about this with previous books and probably Behind the Curtain as well. But I wondered with Burn, I mean, to remind those of you who haven't read it yet, and of course you should buy it immediately and buy several copies of it because it's awesome. Why is my screen backwards? Who knows? Anyway, Burn is, not spelled like this. It's spelled the normal way. It is about these two friends who come out of the Maine woods and the world is on fire. The world that they walk into is literally on fire. They have to figure out what's happening, and what's happening is not good. And there are some scenes in this that are harrowing. I mean, they are harrowing. And I'm wondering if part of you, when you were done, especially now knowing your process, did you look at this thing that you'd made and think, F, fuck, like, is it a cautionary tale for us in some ways?
In a way, and my wife especially, she's like, because I wrote The Dog Stars in 2012, and then, a few years later, this is about a pandemic that sweeps the earth. A few years later, we had COVID.
Right. Yeah. Thanks.
It's super scary, and we're, and it's about global warming and a lot, and that's happening. And then in The River, I wrote about mega fires way up north in northern Canada, way up near the Arctic, and those hadn't happened yet when I wrote The River, and they started happening. So then when I wrote Burn, my wife was like, be careful what you write about, dude. This is weird. Why don't you write something funny?
Yeah, right.
I thought about Good Morning Vietnam. Remember when the guy who takes over the show, the uptight corporal or whatever, he says, somewhere inside, I know I'm funny.
Yeah, right. Well, I think your books are actually funny, but I take Kim's point that you could be writing about something gentle, like from the point of view of a doe or something,
or an 8-year-old girl in Vermont and like The Orchard.
Right. Yeah. We'll
Yeah.
take that. And also, again, some of your intervening books, like they all have these great plots, but they're not necessarily about a sort of apocalyptic scenario that could happen like tomorrow. When I was reading Burn, I thought, I can totally see myself going on vacation somewhere and then driving down the highway to get back to Boston and driving into some sort of ambush like you described in the book. And I thought, if that happens, well, probably A, I'm dead, but B, if I'm not dead, I'm going to call Peter, because Peter is the author I most want to be lost in the wilderness with, like either before or after the apocalypse. There's such authority in the way that you describe how the two main characters handle survival in this scenario, not just with combat, but in the woods. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how you felt your way into those scenes. Like they're Army veterans. Both of these guys are, right? Am I misremembering that? One of them's an Army vet.
They're not Army vets, but they're lifelong hunters, and they don't miss. They're really, really good shots, and they really know the woods, and they're smart. And I don't know. I'm traveling along with these guys, and somebody starts shooting at them, and it's just the craziest thing, Jenna. It's like I'm in a coffee shop at a little cafe table writing along, but I have a literal physical response. Like I feel like this is to me, and then they're sort of avatars, I guess. I never thought of it. I don't play video games, but it's sort of like they dive under behind a bronze statue of a fisherman and an upturned bronze little skiff and take cover. And I sort of am too. And I don't know, I literally don't know where the next shot's going to come from. And then it does. It's really wild. It's so cool. And it's so thrilling. And it's cool to have that experience and be in a coffee shop and know, that probably no one's actually going to be shooting at me. It's interesting. I think it's a very physical activity, writing. And I do, like, if I'm writing those scenes, after a couple hours, I come out of the coffee shop and I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I make myself go get exercise, but I feel like I've already had a workout. And I know they've done these studies with MRIs where they have looked at people's brains when they're reading well-written fiction, and things fire up in those brains. When someone's touching, rough out leather, the brain fires up in that reading that description. The brain fires up in the same places when you touch rough out leather, and the brain's firing up. If someone's throwing a rock, the brain fires up in the same way as when you're throwing a rock. And so I think that's one reason that a neurological reason that fiction is so engrossing and transporting, right? Because I think when we're reading, half the time our brain doesn't really know that this is not, real.
Mm-hmm. If the author has done his job right. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a fangirl, but your stuff is especially vivid and especially physical. I have more questions about the language, but for the time being, I'm going to say I would love to come and sit in a coffee shop across from you while you're writing and watch to see if you're like ducking and, like getting under the table, like throwing coffee on people. And I used to play Nintendo with my siblings, and I was that person who, like, when Mario is like jumping off a ledge, I'd be like, "Whoa!" with the the controller.
Yeah.
My sister would be like, "It doesn't help if you move your body; you have to do it with the controller." But I couldn't help it, I'm like, "But I have to save him; he's gonna fall off the cliff." That's the thing.
I love it.
I do think that I was writing today before we did this interview, and I feel as though I do have that fugue state feeling, especially when I'm writing well, if I can say that I feel like I'm coming out of a movie theater after seeing an especially vivid movie. Like, stuff does not make sense to me for about a half hour after I've been working. Does that happen to you? And like, how do you stop from being interrupted in a coffee shop? Like, what if you were in the middle of a scene and somebody came over to you and said, "Is this chair taken?" I would probably like kill that person inadvertently. Be like, you're in the dream.
Sometimes like I'll just be crying because something's something really sad or moving's happening, and I'll have tears dripping onto the coffee shop table. And I know people are looking at me thinking, that poor son of a bitch, he's like probably going through a bad divorce, or his dog died or something.
Right.
But what's really happening is I'm more thrilled than I've ever been in my life, because I'm so transparent. It's so, you said a movie, and it's almost like, I sometimes think of it as almost like being reincarnated, like living in, like not even watching a movie, but actually living another life, in some sort of quantum simultaneity with the one I'm living now. It's cool.
It is. It's a great way. I mean, it's probably a terrible way to make a living financially because it's very mercurial, but as a lifestyle, guys, it's great. I do feel like when you said avatars of experience, I get into my characters' skins and climb around. And I love that. And I have discovered, especially writing the most recent book, there are two characters who are not me in any way. And they're both first person. It is probably the most fun I've ever had writing, is to write those two characters who are in no way like me in any way whatsoever, because you get to live somebody else's life for a while. Like, how cool is that?
So fun. And especially like when I wrote The Orchard, which is first person point of view from an 8-year-old girl. How fun was that? I mean, I've never been an 8-year-old girl, but I got to be for 7 months. It's really fun. I just loved it. I loved it because I couldn't rely on my old habits. I mean, she wasn't going to reach into her breast pocket and pull out a tin of Copenhagen when she was stressed out.
I mean, she might. I would not put it past any of your characters. You got some tough characters. You have a little girl in Burn. I know. I'm hoping I'm not giving away the plot, but like the hunters, Jess and Story, the main characters pick up a kind of a passenger whose name is Call, and so she, you have to, even from the third person, be able to get into that character's skin to understand what she is feeling. Like, did she surprise you when she showed up in the storyline?
Totally. Oh my God. And I was so sort of delighted that she was there, but I was worried, I was worried about her for sure.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
so she lost her family probably. Yeah. But what a tough little tyke.
She is a tough little girl. I kind of felt inadequate next to Call. I mean, definitely next to the guys. I think, again, if the apocalypse came and I were driving down I-95 and ran into an ambush of some sort, I'd be like, just don't hurt my dog. Like, here's some, I don't know, here's my phone. Like, do whatever you want with me, but like, let me go. I don't have these survival skills that the people have in the book, but even Call has like these great survival skills. Guys, it's such a good adventure story. It's such a good survival story. It's very ominous, I feel like, given what might be, coming down the pike in some ways. Have you gotten feedback from your readers that people are like, oh my God, this is like totally scary. I can see this happening tomorrow.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
I say I really appreciate your note, and let's pray for all of us. That's all you can say. I mean, I don't know. I think the country. I think there are clearly bubbling, um, movements of secession around the country, pockets that are vehement and radical. But I really do think, and I think everybody knows, despite the partisan politics, that Americans have a lot more in common than we do.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, that separates us, and I almost think some of the partisan politics is like posturing, and the extremism is some sort of emotional, it's like some sort of endorphin, adrenaline, addiction. But I think when we really take the scales off our eyes and look at each other, I think we all know that we have a lot more in common, and that this is a big-hearted country, and we're a very generous people. And so I have a little more faith than I think than the book maybe implies.
Good. Do you write out the scenarios that are like the doomsday scenarios in your head to get them out? Do you think? I definitely do that. I'm like, here's the worst case scenario. Put it on paper, it's gone.
Maybe, yeah, it could be. Yeah. I mean, why not? Good.
Except the difference is for you, it comes true. And now we all have to live with sure that. I mean, you and Stephen King, he does the same thing. He'll write about something, right. The rise of Trump, or there's the plague, whatever. I know we have audience questions. I've been monopolizing you for some time. And one of the questions was about reader reaction. I wonder if Karen, our amazing producer, could pop that up. Even if it doesn't suck, hearkening back to the advice you received about make sure it doesn't suck, there will be readers who pan your book. How do you feel about and ultimately process negative feedback from readers? Great question, Sylvia. Thank you for joining us.
The easiest pan is like, every once in a while I go on, I'm a human being, and I do go on Amazon and look at the reviews once in a while. I haven't now for like 3 months, which is amazing, because there are times when I'll look at them every day, when a book first comes out. And the 1-star reviews that are just like, I hated this book.
Wow.
They're the easiest pans to take, because someone really didn't get it, and I loved the book, and so we have a agree to disagree kind of thing. It doesn't hurt me. What hurts is when I get reviews from readers who are like, I've read every one of Peter Heller's books and I love his work, but this really felt disappointing to me. And then I know that they're discerning enough to love some of my work. Geez, you must be sort of smart. But those are tough. And then I just, I've gotten to the point where I think, you can't please everyone all the time. You just can't. And you're not really, man, when I get on my knees before I write a book and I pray to write something true and beautiful, and I'm not praying to write a bestseller or to, sell lots of books or please everybody. It's like you have to have, if you're going to write anything good at all, you have to be, I think for me, I have to be aiming for a question that I address to something much greater than the market or my audience or my editor or the critics. It has to be addressed to something that I can't even name, to ask for something true. And that's the best one can do, right?
That's beautiful. I think it was Hemingway who said the hardest thing in the world to do is to write one true sentence. That resonates with me. Do you literally get on your knees and pray before you start a book?
Every time.
I love that.
When I went to Iowa, I went late. I was like 32 when I went to the Iowa Writers Workshop. I thought, why should I go there? For years. I'm in Colorado. I'm making a living as a writer. But I missed being around, 50 other people who thought poetry was like the most important thing on the planet. And I thought I need to go back and get back in touch with that. I've been writing for magazines. So I went, and I got into both the fiction and the poetry program, and I did both together at the same time, which was very interesting, because the fiction writers were like you and I. They wore blue jeans, they had families, maybe they'd worked. All they wanted to do was tell a good story. The poets, on the other hand, were younger. They had mostly just been in school. They were extremely academic and intellectual, and they wore all black. Because Jory Graham, their idol, who was taught the seminars, wore all black. And so they came to the second seminar in all black. And I looked around and they were talking about negative capability and all this stuff in Keats. And I thought that was really cool and interesting. But I remember Jory's one day, so we were talking about the inception of a poem. And she said, I just love this. She said, I think every poem begins with a question and the poem is the answer. And she said, so don't ask the question of me. And she's looking at all the people around the room that are trying to copy her. Don't ask the question of your audience or the critics, your editor, just as I said just now. And I was just repeating what she said. She said, ask the question of God. And I got goosebumps. I was like, and she meant God as it is for each of us. For me, God might have something to do with the sound of a creek, running through stones and the wind in the trees. But ask that question of God. Aim high. Why not aim high? And I've remembered that my whole writing life since then. And it's been extremely helpful, especially when I feel off my center and I feel like maybe a book isn't selling as well as I thought it should, or, it's like, well, wait a second, what are we doing here?
Did it answer the question, is the question you ask yourself as the writer. That's beautiful. So this is what was happening in the poetry half of my workshop. I did the Boston University workshop and I was a fiction person and we had a rivalry going with the poets. We could hardly even look at the poets. That was what was happening. God was happening. We just were arguing about how to write something that would sell. And then was that actually selling out, or should we strive to do the best we could? What I love too about what you said about getting on your knees before you start a book is that I read somewhere once, and I cannot attribute the quote, but that a prayer is not a prayer unless you're actually on your knees doing it. Like for the important prayers, you should really get down on your actual knees. And I often do that when I'm kind of seeking, it's going to surprise everybody who knows me as an irreverent heretic, but that I will get on my knees if I'm asking for something. And when I start a book, especially, I pray to be worthy of the book, of the people in the book who don't exist unless they somehow do that slip and slide down from the ether through my brain onto the paper. And the question that the book asks is the question that I want to answer, but it's kind of on behalf of them. And I think it's kind of on behalf of readers who maybe have the same question. So if I could be worthy of that, that is always an answered prayer. And I guess we do the best we can with that.
That's beautiful too. And I think that speaks to, I do think to be in art and to do something at all worthy, you have to have the humility that you just talked about. I think it's all about humility before the craft, before your characters, before the greater spirit. And you just have to work hard and be worthy of it, as you said, and do the best you can. It's interesting because I talked about France, and I think, when I approach writing, I sort of think of it as like, I remember learning woodworking in high school. You take the apron off the peg and you put it on, you sharpen the chisels and you start cutting the joints. And it's just a very step-by-step process in which you're just, trying to, do the best you can. And it's a craft. And you show up every day. And I sort of approach writing like that. And then if something really wonderful happens, well, cool. I've made myself ready. But like the French, they have this sort of, I got my picture taken there once at Actes Sud, my publisher, in the courtyard. And it was in Saint Michel, right off the Seine. And I thought I was living this author's dream. And they set up a camera, and Jean-Pierre said, okay, go by the tree. And I did, and I smiled, and he said, oh, no, Peter, you must go like this. And I said, why, Jean-Pierre? He said, because you must show that you suffer.
Sorry. Bien sûr.
I was like, well, but I'm really having a lot of fun. It was so interesting because the mythology there is that the writer, waits. I think. I mean, maybe I'm being arrogant to speak for the French, but I think there is a sort of a feeling like you wait for God to strike, and meanwhile, while you're waiting, you drink too much. Your life falls apart. Your wife leaves you. You don't do your laundry or shave anymore, and then God strikes. It's very different. I don't know. I have a different approach.
That sounds fun, though.
Yeah, I mean, sounds kind of fun.
Maybe. I mean, drink a lot of wine. You're suddenly all in black and white. Like your world is no longer in color. You're just always wandering through the rain wearing a leather blazer. I mean, that sounds right.
Totally. Yeah.
Something like that. I'll try that with the next book. I'll get on my knees and then I'll do all those things.
Do all that stuff. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, you guys. Like, I feel like Peter and I are having coffee on his porch, like maybe with a slug of whiskey in it. I know we've had other questions. We're almost coming up on an hour. So I want to let everybody go to their Friday evenings, but maybe we have one more question that Karen, like no pressure, make it a great question. Pop us up a question for Peter from our audience. You're obviously in love with the natural world. What is one moment that stands out as being maybe the best moment you've ever spent in nature? Excellent. No pressure on you either, Peter.
Wow. Well, I think of one recently. I mean, I have had many feelings of just being so full, like overflowing, that I can't contain it. And oftentimes that happens when I'm fishing and I'm just like knee deep in a mountain creek, and it's evening and I'm just casting, and I can see the daps of fish rising, and I'm all alone, up some little timbered gorge, and maybe I'll look up and there's a deer or an elk watching, which I've had happen a few times, standing in the middle of the stream, or a bear come out and cross, and I just feel so full that I can't contain it. I don't know what to do with it. And I think maybe that's one reason I write, is because I just have to I have to do something with that feeling of love, and fullness. But recently, I've been surfing in Mexico at a river mouth, and there's a lagoon. It's coming out. The Sierra's behind as you're looking inland, and the sun's just rising, and the river's coming out of mangrove, and there's these flights of egrets, lines of egrets flying across the green mangrove in the new sun, and frigate birds circling, and a turtle pops her head up, and you finish your last wave and then paddle across the lagoon, and I felt like I could not be more full. It's just like I cannot believe the beauty of the natural world and how it feels to be connected to it in a vital way. And of course, I feel like it's our job to be responsible and try and help as best we can to be a good steward. But that was a recent moment.
That's a beautiful moment. I think you rose to the occasion gorgeously, because I know that you have many such moments in your adventurous life off the page. Luckily, you preserve them for us in the page. Everybody, please go out and buy Burn, which is full of such moments of beauty as well as terror. A wonderful read. And Peter, thank you so much for being with us again on The Blaze. It's always such a total joy. It makes us feel full. Like we are full having you here.
I loved it. I love being with you. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Thanks for being with us. Our first interview of 2025. Come back all the time and watch all of our interviews. We're so excited to bring you your favorite authors and their new books. And happy weekend, everybody. Happy reading. Thank you. Thanks again, Peter.
Thank you. Bye.